Hello, hello, hello. I am Madam Onça, and this is World Spirit Tarot, and I am happy to welcome you here this evening, 8 p.m. We're going to be doing a little bit of learning, a little bit of laughing, a little bit of reading cards, just see where it goes. So, thanks again for being here. This is a new project for me, this particular way of teaching and being with you. So, I am totally here for what you want and what you need. I know that I want to start by sharing some information with y'all tonight. The teaching component is important to me because I want folks to feel empowered to be able to learn to work with the cards, enjoy the cards, read the cards at home. If you don't already know me, I am Madam Onça. I am the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot. I think I got the book right here. Boom. That. Ba-boom. Currently in its second edition. We are working on a third edition coming up. And I've been working with cards for about 20 years. So while I'm a student and there's so much more to learn, I may be able to answer some questions if you have any. Feel free to pop any tarot related questions up in the comments. I want to take a moment also to acknowledge and thank Nat 21 Adventures for having me here on their Twitch this evening. Twitch is for witches. And also Paula Garbanzo, who is acting as my operator this evening and trying to make things smooth so I can be in the zone and read cards for you. So, I think that's me. What else can I tell you? I have with me here tonight, I've got my own deck, which is the one that I primarily work with, the World Spirit Tarot. But I have, you may be surprised to know, I have a rather enormous collection of other people's decks that I use for reference, learning, and adventure. So I do have with me also the Rider-Waite-Smith, which is perhaps the most famous deck of this century, one of the formative decks of our time. If you are around tarot cards at all, you'll recognize the art. And I surely at some point will start talking and expounding upon why that art is important. What I can tell you now is that my deck, the World Spirit, is a very traditional deck. A traditional tarot deck has 78 cards, is organized in an ace to 10 with 4 suits sort of format. Then there are people or court cards that have bled over into our modern playing cards, you know, kings, queens, that sort of thing. And then we have the major arcana. Those are the big cards that show up in all the movies. The Lover's card, the Death card, the Devil card. So we have, between all of these, we find ourselves with a deck of 78 cards. And I'm a fan of a traditional deck. You may also work with or have friends who work with other decks like oracle decks, fairy decks, that kind of thing. That is actually a whole different system. And I have friends who are very well versed in that, but I don't know a whole lot about oracle decks. So tarot decks is really my specialty. And I encourage you to find a deck that really speaks to you, where the art really speaks to you. That's why I made the deck that I made, because back in the day when I was trying to learn tarot, I looked around at all the decks there were. There was a lot of beautiful art, but there was nothing available at that time that seemed representative to me of the subculture that I lived in. All the people in the cards were thin, white, heteronormative, affluent. It was very Eurocentric, and that was just not what I was seeing around me as a person sort of in the throes of my bohemian life. So I made my deck specifically to bring images into the world the way I wanted to see it reflected back in my readings. People of all sizes, of all colors, of different ethnicities, different places on the gender spectrum and so forth. That was all really important to me. That may or may not be important to you. The biggest thing is find a deck where the art really speaks to you and there's a book that you can really get behind. What that means is it doesn't matter if your deck is pretty so much. And if that's your thing, you want a deck that can really offer you images. If you think of it like dreams, you want a deck that offers you in imagery something to speak to the many aspects of the human experience. So that's a whole other subject. And yeah, there are so many decks now. It's easy to become a deck collector or be overwhelmed. Oh, thank you very much. Sarah Beth Brown says she likes my deck. Thanks so much for that. A few superstitions. Let's take a moment and talk about a few of the superstitions about cards, because sometimes folks will reach out to me and say, you know, are all these things true? The tarot is an evolving art form. That means the way that you experience it now will be different as the meanings evolve and our understanding of society, culture, the human condition, all of these things, as they have evolved in the last 20 years, and as they've evolved in the last 100 years and the last 500 years. Tarot evolves. With that, the traditions and superstitions around tarot also evolve. So, for example, one of the ones that comes up: how should you store your deck once you have it? You've got your cards. Do you keep them, in the back of your jeans pocket? Do you keep them in the box that they came in? Do you keep them in a velvet bag? Do you keep them in a cedar wood box? There's lots of traditions about that, but the bottom line is you get to do the thing that is sustainable for you and keeps your cards protected. Like any tool, you don't really want to leave them out where they're going to get stuck in jelly and get dropped in the cat box and so forth. You want to keep them clean, usable, and respected. If you're a highly organized, shall we say, or ritual-minded person, you may want to develop rituals or particular protocols for that. Again, velvet bags and all that sort of thing. It's totally up to you. These days, I tend to keep mine in the box they came in because it is sturdy and is labeled. And since I have something like 50 tarot decks, it's helpful to know which is which. Because if you pull out a drawer that has 50 velvet bags, take it from me, you may take a minute fishing around trying to find the right one. Another superstition, or tradition, I should say, that I'd like to call to mind. I was just asked about this the other day. Can you buy your own tarot deck, or does it have to be bought for you? As a person who sells tarot decks, I would say, please feel free to buy the one that you like. There's no reason why you can't get the deck that you like. You don't have to wait around and perhaps passively aggressively suggest that other people should buy you a tarot deck. Seize the day. Buy the one that you want. I can tell you, as a person who performed as a professional belly dancer for a very long time, well-intentioned people might say, oh, you're a belly dancer. I got you this thing. I got you this costume. And perhaps I can just say that it's very hard to buy a belly dance costume for another person because the fit, the style, all of those things are very personal. And I would often find myself gifted with something well-intentioned that wasn't really quite the thing that I could use. I think of tarot decks the same way. If you have a friend, family, loved one, art group, whatever, and you say, that's the deck I want, and somebody wants to get it for you, by all means, lean into that, and you can support each other by getting them for each other if you want. Maybe one turns up at the flea market. Maybe you find one in the pocket of an old coat. Maybe you get one out of an estate sale and it just happens to be the right one. But if you get a deck and it's not the one that really speaks to you, it'll just interfere with your study habits. So feel free to just buy the deck that you want. I will, however, discourage you from stealing them. That's a whole thing. For some reason, for a while, people thought, you can't buy it, but you can be gifted it or you can steal it. And that is very inconvenient for the artists and authors who actually make decks. So please don't do that. If you are inclined to believe in justice or karma, however you want to look at that, you can see how that's not the greatest path to go, because there are no victimless crimes when it comes to messing with people's art. So there's a couple superstitions I wanted to just address off the top. Hi, everybody. I can see some folks are coming on in. I really appreciate it. My name is Madam Onça. You may know me from my years of teaching dance. You may know me from teaching tarot through the pandemic online. You may know me from Nat 21 Adventures as Thecla, the Minotaur Mummy Lady. I wear many hats, and some of them have horns. Well, let's talk a little bit about cards. Again, if you have questions, feel free to pop them up in the chat, and my lovely operator over there will make sure that I see them. If you're enjoying yourself, feel free to visit me over there on the PayPal and so forth. What's going to happen tonight, I will talk a little bit about cards teaching, and then we'll move into doing some readings, and then I'll probably talk about what I'm doing in terms of building my tarot practice in the new digital era, because I'm trying to get into this whole world of working with things digitally, a little more committed to that. Then I'll do some more readings for folks, and I will read cards for anyone who asks. I don't need to know what the question is about unless you wish to tell me. Anybody who chooses to make a donation, you will get scooched to the front of the line. If you're already one of my high-rolling patrons, of course, it's on the house. So that being said, let's talk about the number 2. Last week we talked about Aces. Aces, of course, they are the seed, the raw potential of your new project, your new adventure, your question in the tarot. So today we're going to pop open our action cam here, or the card cam, as it were, and talk about twos. Ta-da-da! Let me scooch my glass back. Boop. So these are some of the cards from my deck. I also have the Pamela Coleman Smith versions here, which I'll try to pop up for you as well. In the tarot, as you may know, there are 4 different suits. They are analogous to the ones that we see in the modern playing cards because they are, in fact, cousins. It's really all one deck of cards. These ones just left the house with fancier pants on. They have more ornate imagery, and they have that extra suit. Again, the lovers, the devil, all those cards that show up in the movies. Otherwise, they're basically identical. I have played poker with my own tarot deck. It just takes a long time because you spend a lot of time flipping through pictures. If the aces of each suit suggest the beginning of the project, the idea, the adventure, the twos are all about doing your research. They're all about exploring the ideas and the possibilities. In the tarot, and we do say tarot and tarot interchangeably, as suits you. If there's a convention about that linguistically, I don't know what it is or why. This is how I learned to do it 20 years ago. Some people even say tarot. So whatever works for you. In the tarot, we see wands over here. Wands are the suit that represents the classical Western element of fire. They represent passion, and they tend to come up around projects, career, ambition, willpower, and you might say the drive to manifest things in the material world. So wands are very much fire and ambition. That's your shorthand for it. Then we see cups. When we come to the suit of cups, lovely cups. Here we go. They traditionally represent the suit of water. And they also speak to emotions, feelings. They're very much about relationality, how we connect with other people. They'll definitely come up in relative to relationship. It can also be relationship with oneself. So they're really about the sloshy inner feels, shall we say. Then we come to swords. Swords, of course, are the suit of air. Think about swords, they're very aerodynamic. They are about decision making, the intellect, decisions, boundaries, the power of words. So it's really I want to say swords are in some ways the most fundamentally human because they are so much about how we use our words and our intellect and get ourselves into trouble, as we will see as the swords cards unfold. And then we have pentacles. Pentacles, in some decks, these are known as coins, deniers, stones. Pentacles are about practical things. They're money, their health. With the D&D set, I always say they're gold coins and hit points. They're like what you have to spend. So they're very practical. It's the suit of health and wealth. It's all your practical business. So when we see, and the element of earth. So when we see these different cards, we have our different suits speaking to ambition, speaking to feeling, speaking to decisions and choices, speaking to the realm of the practical. You take that and you add that number 2. The 2 universally in the tarot speaks to an initial level of exploration, or I think of it as due diligence in the realm of that suit. For example, if we come here to our 2 of Wands, in fact, I'll give you the see if I can find the old-fashioned image of it as well. So here's my version. We have a person standing on the beach. Here's the, again, my deck is quite traditional. I just updated some of the imagery to be more inclusive. Here's the traditional Pamela Coleman Smith version, the Rider-Waite version. Same basic thing. We see a person gazing out upon the world, and there are the wands, almost making a sort of a frame for them. The 2 of Wands comes up for us when we are standing on the brink of a new project, some ambition, hunger, drive, and it is time to learn everything that it's going to take in order to move forward. So between that raw potential of the ace and the maturation of the suit as the numbers continue, that 2 is the part where you can see he's going, hey, look, science is real. let me learn how things work. Let me learn how I need to proceed in order to create the ideal conditions to unfurl my ambition. That's what the 2 of Wands is about. Measuring, researching, all that good stuff. Science. Hey, I see Dave Lee out there. Hi, Dave Lee. And then when we take that same notion of due diligence, essentially, that exploration, that discovery, we take that into the realm of the 2 of Cups. Here we see cups, again, emotionality, water. This tends to come up when we are, when we are experiencing a renewal of emotional availability. So sometimes it comes up when it's like, ooh, it's a new relationship. It can also be moving through past trauma in order to be more authentically available to yourself. You can see there's a real quality here of people coming together. There's a sort of a dancing quality about it. It's playful. It's not super serious, but this is about people sort of rediscovering the capacity to feel and be emotionally available. And again, here's the Pamela Coleman Smith version, a little bit more serious, a little bit more somber, but still rather stately. I wanted to put mine in a fairy circle because I thought that was cooler. Science. Speaking of science, now we come to the swords. The swords are very much, again, intellect, decision-making. So often that swords are about communication and establishing boundaries. So we bring that notion of the 2, the exploration of feeling around for proof of concept, and the idea of ideas, as it were. And we find ourselves in the 2 of Swords. It is the card that comes up when we are caught between multiple options. There's some technical things going on over here. What's going on? Is that better? We're fiddling with the mic. This is all a test run, people. It's all a test run. 2 of Swords comes up often when you are caught between decisions or when you are weighing things in your mind. You can see this figure is literally there, spanning the abyss and weighing, measuring, considering. Even though it's a card of thinking, logic, and so forth, it is a card that is depicted here at night, and they are blindfolded. They are very much listening inward, having gathered information on the outside. They're listening inward, preparing to make a significant decision. This card does come up when you are being cautioned about procrastination. So there's a notion of stay with it and think things through, but at some point you do have to jump and take action. Here's the Pamela Coleman Smith version. Also has sort of a quality of meditative tranquility about it, but I thought, who could hold a sword like that for very long? Again, we find ourselves taking this concept of the 2, that unfolding of possibility, that exploration and discovery of potential. And we see here in Pentacles, if you take that idea of seeing what you can do, of experimentation, and you apply it to the realm of the practical, we see here the card of robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say. This is very much a card of getting a lot done with very little resources. So this is basically the beginning of every self-funded project. It's the beginning of including this one, sort of the grand vision, but meanwhile you're just trying to figure out how to how to keep the cash flow moving, how to get that first layer of bricks laid, how to make sure that the mic works and is in the right place. It's about some real hands-on logistics, let's say. Incidentally, here's the traditional version. Boop. Let's see if I can get him in there. So once again, sort of a fantastical juggler image. There's the churning sea and the uneven footwork, and somehow this person is managing to make it look great. So incidentally, this card is an image of my mother, because I think of this very much as the card of it's the card of the thrifty single mom. It is the card of, again, any entrepreneur who has to figure out how to make grand visions work while moving in limited conditions initially. And that was certainly my mom, who did a stellar job of bringing us up with very little to work with and somehow managing to make it all look like a graceful dance. So, TWOS. If you have any questions about the TWOS, feel free to drop them in here. We'll talk more about it. Yes, somebody said the cash planning stage for sure. I want to mention also that pentacles, while they can refer to material resources, they can refer to money, and so forth. They can also refer to spoons. If you'll go with me, that is a sort of popular idiom that describes like how much energy you have. So this can come up around just trying to get some sort of healthy self-care practice. It may come up around what it takes to be thrifty and learn to eat well if you haven't been, what it takes to try to restructure your life so you can maybe fit a walk into your pandemic and get up from your computer once in a while. TWOS are really, really about figuring out the shape of the box that you're in, the shape of the box that you would prefer to be in, or the box that you'd like to get out of, and making those initial exploratory choices that will help you get some mobility in the area of your suit, be it career, be it decision making and boundaries, be it relationships and connection, be it about health and wealth, the practical matters. I also want to mention that when we get a lot of TWOS coming up in a reading, for example, if we threw a bunch of cards down, as we will in a little bit, should we get a whole bunch of TWOS popping up, that suggests that your situation and your question are that there's a lot of the forces at play relative to your question are in the initial stages. For example, were I to do an extended reading with someone and I sit down where we've set aside an hour, and in that amount of time, we're going to get maybe a dozen cards on the table, fairly complicated reading. Again, if you think about the tarot as it's like a dream language. It is a language of metaphor that we have agreed upon over hundreds of years as being a useful way to sort of bounce around ideas and understand what's really going on for us. So by the time you've got 12 cards on the table, that's like having a full night's worth of dream imagery to work with. And thank you. And so what if you get multiple TWOS in a reading? What that suggests is that in multiple areas of your life, you are sort of either starting over, or that you are, again, sort of emotionally and creatively available to begin anew. So, for example, if a bunch of TWOS came up after you had been through some sort of a crisis, it would suggest that you are moving past that part and you are ready to start over and move into a phase of reinventing your life. Likewise, if someone asks me a question and we get gobs and scads of 9s and 10s, numerically, in the language of the tarot, that suggests that a situation is sort of winding down to a close. Everything is, all the fruit has ripened, and maybe it is starting to pass over. So the numbers, I was slow to arrive at an understanding of what numbers mean in tarot. I'm not exactly dysmathic, but I could say I was mathematically disinclined. And yeah, it took me a while to really start to understand the numbers as another grid sort of on which you could begin to understand the cards. Not just pictures, not just stories, but also the numbers have something to share with us. So again, last week we did aces. We actually had quite a few aces come up in the readings that we did, perhaps because we had explored that concept together. And today we have some TWOS. We're just going to move our way through the deck week by week, and eventually we'll get to some of the big, wild, zany cards too. Because I made this deck also, I'm excited to be able to share with you a little bit about the art and the process, what made me make those decisions artistically. Speaking of which, let's take a moment to look at this Two of Cups. You can see we've got these figures here. Again, fairly traditional. There's the people facing each other. I did make my people far more gender ambiguous than we see in the Victorian version, because love looks like lots of things to lots of people. One is carrying a rose and one is carrying a lily. That is Victorian era imagery for passion and innocence. But I want to call your attention to these figures that I have up in the corners, because we have Pan, the feral god, and we have Kuan Yin, goddess of compassion, up here poking their heads into the corner. That is a reference to the fact that while this card does not always come up for romantic relationships, it can. Uh, and it can certainly come up around subjects that we're passionate about. So we see here the gods and goddesses of passion and compassion just sort of poking their heads in to make a mention to the notion that finding a livable peace in relationship often means trying to find some sort of way to work between those two poles or tensions of passion and compassion. Like, I want to be with you and do all the things, but we also have to be able to like cohabitate uh, or collaborate in terms of our projects or our daily living or whatever. So it can be very much about a balancing of temperaments. And we'll see later if the Lover's card pops up, it very much takes this same imagery and makes it extra large. So this is sort of it's like a foreshadowing of the Lover's card in a sense, while still addressing more than merely romantic relationships. So anyway, questions about twos? Let me know. The next thing I want to do, we've got about another half hour. And so what I'm hoping to do is read a few cards for folks so you can see how I read. If you have a question, I've got somebody over here who will make a list in case I need to try to keep track. I'm happy to do it for you just so we can explore what that can look like. Yeah, it's my pleasure. And then last week we had a little bit of time. I actually did some reading for the show itself because it's very much in the growing, learning, planning stages, as you can see. Yeah. And then I also want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing with my Patreon folks, because in the pandemic time, I'm not traveling to teach tarot or dance or anything right now. So I'm really learning to use these interactive digital mediums in order to connect with people and give you what you need. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I do want to say that what I would have been doing, were it not for COVID right now, we were going with Byron Ballard, who is a wonderful Appalachian elder, author, and witch. She's a priestess who has a lot of great books. And in fact, she just dropped another book today or yesterday, I think. We were going to be on a wine and witchcraft tour of Sicily with Byron that my husband Paulo and I were going to be producing together along with Byron. And I was going to be teaching tarot there. So I'm glad to be here with you. Oh, I wish that we all could be in Sicily right now, far from Mount Etna, because apparently it's exploding again. But I wish that we could all be there. Since we're not there, let's just pretend that we're on our wine and witchcraft tour and enjoy this time together. Now, if anybody would like to get your cards read, let me know. I'm going to talk you through how I actually do my reading and talk more about traditions, superstitions, and whatnot. Don't be shy. I know some of you would like it. Let me know. Okay, great. You're up. You're first. So, as far as how a person reads cards, again, that is entirely up to the individual. So I am seeing huge numbers of people come out of the broom closet, as we like to say. Witchcraft is very much a thing right now. There's all the TikTok witches, and you can't go to Joann's Fabric without falling over a bunch of like witchy themed fabric and so forth. And it's great. I'm all for it. I think it's a natural cultural response to our nation having gone through a challenging and somewhat conservative time. So I'm all for it. Let's do it. However, I find myself sometimes surprised by some of the things that people don't know. And I see a lot of folks of all ages saying, but how do I do it right? How do I smudge stuff right? How do I read tarot cards right? How do I do a spell right? Here's the big secret. There's no right way to do any of this. There may be ethical ways to do things, and there may be unethical ways to approach things, but there's not one way to do things. We're not talking about one unbroken tradition. We're talking about the folk ways of many people in many cultures over time, folks on many continents, folks of many colors, different languages, different religions. When we're talking about witchcraft or tarot or metaphysics or women's spirituality or permaculture or whatever kind of thing you're talking about, there's no one way. So anybody who insists that there is one way to read tarot cards, they must be selling you something, because it's not true. What there is whatever way you figure out that works for you. I will show you what I do, and then you will develop your own practice and figure out what it is. My favorite way to describe this, I learned from someone, she learned from someone, I'm sharing information with you. One of the people that I've worked with is a druid priestess who super gal, and the way that she reads cards is she takes the deck, she actually has my deck, and she goes, here's my question, shuffle, I'm asking the cards. She says it and she throws the whole deck in the air and it comes down on the ground, and the cards that are face up are the ones that are answering her question. I imagine that she also has got great glutes and hamstrings, although I haven't checked, because that's a lot of time spent crawling around trying to pick your cards back up. Make sure you sweep first. The point being that there is no one right way. Like, I'm not about to do that in here. You'd spend the whole show watching me bob up and down trying to pick cards above the floor. Not practical. But if that's what works for you and gives you answer, do that. So, right? It's great. I mean, there is no wrong way. In fact, I will tell you also, I was teaching a private session to some folks, really smart, really committed, really driven, a lot of good questions, but very kind of, I want to say, like, buttoned up, maybe a little OCD about, like, I have all of my things and I've got my crystals and I've got my stuff in the box. Basically the opposite of me in that way. And I was saying to them, there is no one way to do this. And they were like, yeah. I could tell that they didn't really believe it. And I said, you have to understand that, like, these cards, they have a lot to offer you. There's a lot of tradition and so forth, but they're just pieces of paper. And their faces went, they like turned green for a second. And that was the point. I wanted to shake them up and go, it's a book. I like to think it's a good book. I helped to write it, but it is not a mystical entity unto itself, right? It has the power that you bring it as a person with a spirit and an intellect and a life experience who maybe is willing to learn and integrate information. That's what comes to it. So you find the thing that works. Oh, yes. And so I hear somebody was asking in the comments about whether you can get a deck for yourself. Oh, okay. So this is a great question. Cherry, don't know if you covered this yet, but is it true that you should keep a deck for yourself and a deck for when you read for others? This is another one of those things where you get to do the thing that works for you. I have always let other people handle my cards prior to COVID. That is partly because I actually made my deck. I did all the art, I did all the research, I carved them. So, I mean, I have a very secure relationship with my deck, and I don't mind if they, like, read around. It's not a problem for me energetically. Some folks really aren't comfortable sharing their physical sort of ritual objects, as it were, with other people. So if that's you, keep a deck for you, keep a deck for them. If that's you, I also encourage you to sort of clean that deck energetically out in between friends or clients that you're reading for as well. I feel that I am able to maintain that sort of magical hygiene, if you want to think of it that way. I will say, however, the last night before COVID shut down, I was at a gig in a David Lynch style moose lodge in the middle of nowhere. It was truly one of the most bizarre gigs I've ever done, way, way out on the coast. And no. I was truly one of the strangest gigs that I've ever done. Everyone was really great, but they got drunker and drunker, and they just got more and more in my face and touched my deck. That deck not only needed to be, like, energetically cleaned, but also I literally put it in the closet for 2 months and just went and got a different deck, because in the COVID times, I just didn't want to take a chance. So I hope that answers your question. Do the thing that works for you. Like I said, I don't have an issue using, sharing decks with people, let's say. In fact, we have quite a deck library here, because there's a number of us that read cards, and we just have one sort of giant kiosk full of decks, so anybody can use any deck at any time. So it's my pleasure to help. All right, so this is how I would do a reading, and then I think I'm reading for M first. Yep. Okay, so what I do. Were we sitting together for an hour, or even half an hour, then it would be up to you whether you told me what the reading was about. I don't need to know. will allow me to bring different insights, obviously, but generally we're counting on the cards to tell you something about what you know. I will also say that most folks don't talk about the cards while they read them. Like they might just look at the reading and go, "Oh, I can see that, next week you've got some kind of a situation going on with people at work." I like to break it down card by card so that the person that I'm reading for, which we call the querent, so that the querent has an opportunity to interact, respond, ask specific questions, and then they can say, "Oh, that looks just like my cat," so that it's more interactive. That's how I read. I've actually never met anybody else who reads in the same way. I attribute it to being such a very Gemini, kind of a Gemini. So what I do, I think of you. In this case, we're pulling for M. I am just going to shuffle the cards a little bit, try to get those aces and twos re-randomized. It is traditional, if you are so inclined. Do you want to put the action cam on, the card cam? It is traditional and entirely optional to set your cards down and divide them into 3 piles. If you have lots of time, you can divide them into 3 piles 3 times. We will not do that right now. Also notice, you perhaps cannot tell because of the magic of the internet, but I'm actually, I'm right-handed, and I do most of my card work with my left hand. That is a conscious choice. There's a tradition, shall we say, that your non-dominant hand is on better speaking terms with your intuitive mind. So I try to use this hand, even though it is far less dexterous. Watch me brush my teeth with my left hand sometime to find out. This hand is less dexterous, but it's awfully good with tarot cards. So I'll do my dividing. And then, as I learned from my teacher, I have to figure out the best way to do this for the camera. Generally, I will spread them out. If you're working with a client, you can spread the whole fan out across the table. And then I will take my non-dominant hand and I'll just feel across the deck for the cards that speak to me. They may tingle, they may be warm, they may be cool, they may vibrate. And sure, maybe it's the heat of my hand bouncing off the cards. Whatever it is, I listen to it. Carmel, who I live with and read cards with frequently, she doesn't have that experience with the cards. She feels it in her brain, like her brain tells her when to, the gray matter tells her when to pull. So you find your prompt. I'm thinking of M. I'm going to pull 3 cards. The whole deck is like very lively right now. Right there. Try to keep them in the shot. Come on, you. Boop. There we go. To get a miniature version. That's here. Great. Right there. Great. So we're going to pull these 3 cards and I will describe them to you. And then I will generally try to just come up with a synopsis that says what I think these cards are saying. Now, one of the questions you might be going to ask me now is, do I do reversals? Which is to say, do I read cards that come up upside down? Mostly I don't. Sometimes I do. In general, I feel that with 78 cards that have come to us over hundreds and hundreds of years, we've got plenty of information to be working with. I will, however, if an extra card jumps out, like sometimes 2 will slide out or 1 will pop out of your hand and fall on the floor, I consider those jumpers volunteers and I will integrate them. So you may find yourself with extra cards in a reading. So what we see here, you have, out of 3 cards, you have 2 wands cards. Again, wands are fire, ambition, drive. Sometimes you might say they're like bucket list items. And you have one of the major arcana, which we haven't really talked about yet. One way of thinking about the major and minor arcana, which is to say the larger and smaller secrets, as they're also translated. The minors are kind of your day-to-day life list things, and the majors are like big life questions or big life, like what are you here to do, if you want to put it that way. So the Fool is a great card. But let's talk about these wands first. You've got a 4. What are 4s? Stable like a table. This 4 of Wands suggests stability in the realm of accomplishment, work, drive, passion. And you can see, if you look closely, this very much has a feeling of Beltane. So sometimes this will come up around not only are you in a good place as far as accomplishments and what you've been working on, like things are looking good, but it's also a matter of public recognition. Like folks want to come together and celebrate. It's time to, have a party about it, so to speak. Like you can see everyone has come together to celebrate. So very stable. Then we look at the Six of Wands. Six is the ultra stable table. You've now kicked out the extra two legs on your long dining room table. The Six of Wands particularly is about being publicly recognized. The Four might be you and your friends going, "Hey, we did the thing and it's really working out. Let's pat ourselves in the back." But the Six is like everyone can see. You went to the mountain, you learned the thing, you carried back the tablets, and everyone has turned out to see it. It's very much about being publicly lauded for your efforts. So those together are just fantastically affirmative cards to see, especially together. It's a real kind of power pair. Again, we look to see lots of wands. Lots of wands tell us that you are very much moving forward in this area of like ambition and drive. Then you've got the Fool card. The Fool is the first of all the major arcana. There's 22, and they make a long story that goes from, I don't know anything about anything, but the universe really wants to see me succeed, to the final card, which is usually known as the world or the universe. And that is the card of, I figured it out. I survived all of the things. I had all the adventures. I went through all of the cards that come up in the majors of virtues and vices and interpersonal struggle and the identity crises and all the things that might come up for us in the course of our lives. The universe card says, you did a great job. So when the Fool card comes up, it usually suggests that you are standing on the beginning, the brink of a new chapter. And sometimes you can see the figure, they're about to step off the roof. And yet all the birds, all the animals are sort of leaping about to suggest that the forces of the world want to support you in making this big, bold leap at this time. Sometimes the Fool is just a fool. But in this context, this is very much about being willing to admit that you don't know everything and that you get to start afresh, learning a whole new path. So put together, it looks great to me, Em. You've got all of this accomplishment, and with that, you've got this quality of sort of youthful enjoyment and adventure and vivacity. So whatever you've got going on looks good to me. And then normally I would encourage someone to take a picture of the cards where we together so that they can take it home and they can contact me later and say, what was it that you said about the Six of Wands again? I already forget because I was at a party and I was kind of drunk. That way I can continue to help them translate the reading over time. And then you scoop them back up. This is that part where the magical hygiene in your brain. Yay, good. This is the part where the magical hygiene in your brain is really important. You want to re-randomize the cards. Some people are really beautiful shufflers and they can do that, like I think of it as, fancy gambling, fancy Dan shuffling. I'm not that person. I'm partly because my cards are large. When I made this art, I never intended anyone but me to ever use it. So the cards are big. I made them so that I could fit in all the art I wanted. I was never thinking about whether they would be suitable for mass distribution until that's what people wanted. So, yes, question. How do you do an energy cleansing of your deck? That's a great question. There's the minor version, which is literally me as I'm shuffling in between right now. I know I'm talking to you, but internally, I have a separate program running that is saying, make me a conduit of energy for the next person. Let me get M's energy out and make myself and the cards available for the next person. Because sometimes you'll pull a reading and it clearly was still about the other person, like the last person in your chair. So internally, I'm running that. But when it comes to like end of the day or end of the week or, whatever your new moon antics or whatever you might want to do, you can set them in a bowl with some salt, the great universal cleanser and healer in many magical traditions. You can just kind of fan them out in the moonlight on your windowsill. That's another popular one. Or you can just do the factory reset, you call it. Literally put them all back in order. From ace to 10 through the people cards, next suit, ace to 10 through the people cards. You can sort of reorder the whole thing and let them set a minute in that sort of neutral before you reshuffle them. And I realize from a scientific point of view, this is all crazy talk. And yet, Humans are complex. Science can be real at the same time that we recognize that we are the product of hundreds of thousands of years of mythic thinking, and it got us really far. So making space in your life for the woo that says, put your cards in the windowsill, do it. Hope that answers your question. All right, who's up next?
Kitty cat.
Oh, and now some cards for Kitty Chaos. So I'm going to shuffle these cards. As I said, internally, I'm thinking, make me a conduit of information for this person. As an entertainer, as a person who talks and endeavors to be informative and charming, you have to make some space for the intuition to creep in behind all that. So that space is called put aside the ego and be a conduit of information for the kitty. I'm going to divide the cards up. Again, you can make that very ostentatious if you like. 100 years ago, people would lay their cards out and they would, hold them up with their hand over them, and they would do a whole invocation to their guardian angel. If that works for you, do that. But me, I'm just going to fan them out on the table. I'm thinking of Kitty. I also will sometimes rub my palms, having read probably 30 years ago about the Dogon people in Africa and the way that they greet the sun, traditionally would greet the sun in the morning with their palms. It made a very big impression on me as a young person. And so when I want to make sure that the energy's in my hands, I'll rub my palms. Great. Kitty, 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 chaos. All right. If we were working together for an hour, I would leave the other cards fanned out on the table so that we would be able to continue to draw. But in this case, because we're working in a limited space and a limited time. Ooh, look at you, living big. So again, there's this set of big fancy cards, the major arcana. And those are the ones that tell us a lot about what we are here to do. Like if our life was a movie script, this is sort of like the big arc of the story. So Kitty got a couple of those. Everybody looks at the death card and goes, ah, but the death card's actually our friend. This card describes transformation. It is moving from one phase to the other. Like you can see in this image, something is on the pyre, old habits, old lifestyle, all of these things are there burning up, and people are busy feeling very sad about it because that's what we do when confronted with change that was not our idea, is we grieve. But if you look up, what they're missing is this incredible phoenix. This reborn thing is rising up out of the sort of moldering compost heap of what was. So when the death card comes up, it usually feels like 11 months of miserable pandemic and being uncertain about what the future holds and whether we get to go back to our old job and whether there'll ever be Mardi Gras again and so forth. It feels like loss. But what this card comes up to suggest is that you're secretly so over and so ready for things to move and be fresh and lively. When you are able to rise up, you're going to burst out like a phoenix. So that's it's a scary card, but it's just because change is hard. Now you are a beautiful butterfly. Now the judgment card we can see here. Oh, look, it's the priest of Anubis, which means something. Which means something to Kitty. We actually have a lovely picture of her dressed just like this. So when the judgment card comes up, this is one of the big cards that asks you not only who do you want to be. Like if you got to write up a character sheet of yourself, who do you want to be in this life? How would you like to define yourself? How would you like to be known? How would you like to set your own parameters? Thank you very much, Sarah Beth Brown. There's a story I'll tell you about that card when we're done too. The judgment card also is very much a card of resurrection. Again, it suggests that old stuff is old and you are ready to burst out. You can see here the figure of the feather of truth, being weighed against the soul and going, Yes, you are ready to move on to the next adventure. So everything here suggests change. Now, the Seeker of Wands, the Seeker is analogous to the Knight. You can see he's sort of hot and sassy, lazed back on his horse. He is in a smoldering landscape. This is about willpower, drive, ambition. It's just figuring out where you want to go. You can see that while he's got a lot of potential, he's still sort of lollygagging here. Once he gets up to speed, he'll be able to move quickly into getting all of his potential manifest. The thing about this guy, he's no king. He doesn't know everything. He's willing to go out and bump into things. He's willing to, I always think of this as the teenager with a car. Like, no teenager really knows how to drive a car. And unfortunately, you have to let them drive a car to learn. So this is the part where all of your raw potential is ready to get moving as soon as you're permitted, and you're going to bump into things as you figure out how you want to manifest your new awesome. And I would hasten to add, since I know you, I would not take from this that nothing that you ever did will ever be the same. I mean, we're all going to deal with that to a certain extent, but this just suggests that for you on a deep level, it's not merely circumstantial. It's like who and what you are is going to go through a maturation process as a result of all of this time period. And then you're just going to like ride off into the sunset and have this Seeker of Wands adventure. So what I want to say about the Death card here before I forget, this card here, some folks do like this version of this card. It speaks to me. I found the old traditional version of this card rather morbid. And I'm like, I'm a gothy kid. I'm not afraid of that, but I just felt like it was missing something in its sort of fixation on the finite aspect of the Death card, let's say, because it's supposed to be a card of transformation, but all the imagery is always just people getting hacked down, and it's sort of a messy battlefield situation. And it was apparent to me that this card was very much about where you were, but also where you're going. So this figure here is actually one of my childhood friends who was killed in the 90s in one of the first campus shootings. There's I say great book, of course it's a very sad and difficult book, but a fascinating book about it called Gone Boy that his father wrote. He was the kid, like I was the first girl he ever kissed. He was the kid in my play group down the street. We were in the same youth group as teenagers. Like we were totally buds. And he was a interesting, talented, driven person, kid who went off to fancy private school and got shot by another kid who had been radicalized to the right and gotten ammunition in the mail. And this is like 1992, maybe. And that was a formative event for me. That wasn't, obviously it was a formative event for him too, but it was a transformative moment in terms of me. Everyone that I had never known who had died that was a human had been an older person where it wasn't a surprise. It was an aging grandparent and so forth. This was the first time I really understood that kind of transformation can happen to any of us. And it informed my absolute understanding of how I wanted to live my life, how I wanted to parent, all of that. So this is my homage to my friend Galen Gibson. Rest in peace. So, and it's also the card that I was working on, incidentally, when Paulo Garbanzo and I met 20 some years ago in a cafe. And he was like, hey, what you working on? And he was like, oh, that's it. Whoever this person is, I'm in for the long game. Okay, who's next? Do you feel like the qualities of the reading are different when you know the person versus with a stranger? Certainly. If I'm cold reading, especially here where like I can't even see you or read your body language or anything, of course, I'm going to bring potentially less nuance to it because I can't see you go. It's part of why I like to never ask what someone's question is. I feel like it gives me an opportunity to really try to listen to what the cards are saying. But one of the challenges for you, if you're a person who wants to learn about cards, what they have to say, there's a couple different aspects that you bring to it, skill sets. One is that you learn to lean into your intuition. There's an academic component. Somebody referred to as being a tarot historian. You just learn the information that's stuck to each card. Like for hundreds of years, people have said that these images and experiences are connected with this card. But your job as a person who's trying to be intuitive is to understand how this card and these qualities interact with this card and these qualities. That's the part where, like, knowing what somebody's question is about or knowing something about them may help. It is certainly easier to read for people that are in front of you. I find it very difficult to read for myself. So even I know exactly what my questions are about. So you just strive, learn. Okay, who's next?
Sarah Beth.
Oh, Sarah Beth. All righty. Let me read for you. Oh, okay. Okay. Mm. Okay, let's see what we've got. Now, if we were able to sit and work with each other for, for a longer period of time, then I would take these cards and we would, right. And then after May, we'll probably have to be done, I suppose, just because it'll get long. But what I would normally do then is, we would say, well, tell me more about this card. Do you have questions about this card? And you end up building a whole sort of spread. In fact, Paula, would you pop that graphic up that we started with before I flip these cards over? So what I'm trying to do is for my Patreon folks is I'm learning to use the handy dandy tablet that Mab made for me, so I can make these artsy maps helping people to learn how to do different spreads at home. And I am going to set them up as a PDF for my Patreon people. So with a little video every month, it's like, here's another way to lay out your cards. Here's a few tips. Here is a cool thing that you can print out and put in your folder. So this so many options spread, this is kind of how I would read cards for you if we were sitting together for a long period of time. Initial layer of cards, maybe these ones that we've laid out on the table now. And then you would say, well, tell me more about the first card. Tell me more about the second card. And we end up growing this sort of organic tree, as it were, across the table of information. And then you start to look for patterns and go, wow, it's kind of weird that there's all these women and everyone's looking to the left. Or do you notice how many pentacles there are in this, and so forth? So you can deduce bigger messages in the sort of dream language from the big picture that the cards present. But today, since we're doing like 3 cards at a time, we do what we can. Thank you, Mr. Operator. Now, that's what we got. We have the 6 of Cups. We have the Hierophant, and we have the 9 of Wands. So what do? We look down here and see if there's a preponderance of anything in particular. No, we've got some very diverse numbers. There's a 6, there's a 9. We've got something from 3 different suits. So what the sense that I get right here is that we are really kind of looking at your life in a big picture rather than, focused in on one particular issue. Let's talk about the Hierophant first. Funny thing about that, this is the second edition of my deck to come out, and I never realized that Hierophant was spelled wrong because, and there's 15,000 copies of this deck in the world or something, because no spell check can catch it. And I never thought about it. I mean, I had multiple people proofread, many people proofread, and I didn't catch it. So the next edition, it will be spelled properly. But meanwhile, Hierophant, it's like the heir apparent instead of hierarchy. Kind of hilarious. So the Hierophant, in traditional decks, this used to be known back in the day as the Pope. You can see here we have sort of Aztec priest. He is in an as above, so below position. There are some folks supplicant at his feet. And this is the card that comes up when it is time for you to buckle down and learn from someone else. It may be getting a certification. It may be going back to school. It may be going back to serious school. like trade school, graduation, grad school. This is very much about being willing to be humble to learn from the great institutions that exist, as compared to being on more of a personally guided vision quest sort of approach to learning. So this is definitely about being willing to kneel at the altar of information and do what you have to do in order to partake of its traditions, gravitas, and greatness. Then we see cups. We also see wands. This wand, 9 of wands, you can see he's a little bit, nines are a fully mature number. It's like, it's almost at the top. You have a very, it's 3 threes. You have a very full bouquet of wands at this point. And you can see everything is warm. Everything is feisty. He's clearly very dynamic. He's getting a lot done, but this guy looks a little sketched out. He looks like maybe a person who is in the habit of saying yes to everything and is beginning to approach burnout. So while this is a card of high function, it's a card of accomplishment, it is a card of really doing a lot in that area of career, ambition, etc. It suggests that maybe you have been saying yes for so long. It feels a little bit to me like the PTSD that would come from being the person everyone goes to for their answers all the time. So weigh that out. Fortunately, over here, in addition to this very important, like heavy series learning card and this taking on the burdens of the world to make everything function card, over here we have the 6 of cups. You can see they sort of have a very like off the shoulder, they're unarmored, they're just having a nice time running around in the garden. 6 again is a nice stable. It is a number that is both stable and wise in the context of the tarot. So this suggests, in the realm of emotions and relationship, it is a good time to take care of yourself, reconnect with your roots or your sort of what is familiar and happy place for you. That may literally be your favorite books, your favorite personal rituals, connecting with people from your past that make you feel warm and fuzzy. Whatever it is for you, this card is known as the sanctuary of the familiar. So try to lean into what is comfortable and good there in order to keep yourself recharged. So looking at it all as a big picture, looks to me like you've got a call to action that involves personal sacrifice and a certain amount of humility, as it were, in terms of being willing to learn what is out there for you and trying to find a livable balance between being the person who has to do so much of the time and is good at it, but perhaps tired, and the person who is able to also engage in some self-care and emotional connection in order to make the rest of this worth it. That's what that looks like to me. So I think we've got 2 more. Yes? Okay. Who's up next? I really appreciate y'all spending this time with me and making it fun, because I'm happy to work with you and for you. I just need to know what you need from me. Oh, great. And now we are reading for Delia Rosa. I do extended readings once a month, like long, full range for some of my higher end Patreon people. If anybody's interested in that. And I got asked at Shakespeare's coffee hour this morning. I do just do readings for folks as well. I can read for you online, not in a public stream, so that we can talk face to face and you can give me more information if you want to. Okay. Thank you, Delia. I feel like you consistently show up for me, and I appreciate that. Ooh, interestingly, so for most folks, the cards have been sort of warm and fizzy is the best way I can explain it. In this case, they're still friendly, but they feel cooler. It's like there's a little breeze blowing across them or something. There you go. Yeah, interesting. It's hiding in here. Incidentally, as far as like developing your personal reading practice, whatever your personal protocol is, my teacher, whose name was Kate Nordstrom, she's a great, I would say, sort of a surrealist painter in that like Chagall kind of feeling. If I'm using my terms right, I can picture her work. Her teacher taught her to actually flip the deck over and not really looking at it, but just kind of scroll through the whole deck face up. Not really paying attention, kind of with her eyes gazing out. And the notion her teacher gave her was the theory being that way you were letting your deep mind know where the cards were in order to help ensure that you'd be able to find the card you needed in order to explain to yourself in the dream language of the tarot. It's not something that I've chosen to make part of my personal practice, but if it's useful for you, just think about that. Flip the cards over and just kind of surf through them. The Seer of Pentacles. Oh, look, the Hierophant is back in the hot seat. So you too, you know what the Hierophant means. You too look like you've got some learning to do at the feet or the heels of tradition. In addition to being academic, that can also be, learning, like studying yoga in a traditional, like in a school format or so forth. It can mean a lot of things. It definitely means going to someone who has the information. Now, a seer is analogous to a princess or a page in another deck. I have seers because I wanted to move away from the classist structure that was kings and queens and the people that work for them, the gendered people that work for them. So, Seer of Pentacles in this case, it is like it is a youthful, joyful, questing hunger for information. And because it's pentacles, again, we're talking about practical stuff. So this is like a studious, loyal kind of personality, maybe someone in your life, maybe aspects of yourself that you need to cultivate. And you can see she's been sitting here in meditation over her studies for so long that like the ivy has wrapped around her. The creatures of the forest have come out to check her out. She has become integral to her environment because she's so committed to deep learning and information. So she really suggests buckle down. And the Seven of Cups, this incidentally is actually a picture of my dad, who is very much a dreamer. He was a dissipated artist, shall we say. But, cups, again, are about how we connect. And the sevens haven't come up yet for us tonight, but they are, my teacher used to say, they're the vortex cards. They're the part where it's not chaotic exactly, but you've got the wisdom of the sixth, and then you add that sort of ineffable something in life, and suddenly you're in a position of deep personal evaluation. So when the sevens come up in any suit, it's like, is that what I meant to do? How do I feel about this? Where do I go from here? It's evaluative. So in this case, it's the card of the dreamer. It's the part that says, how do I feel? What do I want and need? What can I envision, once again, that's outside the box? So you see him sort of gazing off into the distance and seeing all these fantastical and phantasmagorical things. It's very much a card of daydreaming and also revisioning, I would say, how you might want to live. So we see here this interesting mix between everything that is very sort of stable and practical and driven about the seer and about the Hierophant. They're like, make the task, do the deal, read the paper, write the paper, get the paper, save the paper, spend the paper. They're very practical. And then the Seven of Cups is really about, but what is it all about for you? What do you want that to be? What do you need it to mean? So a very interesting sort of, I don't want to say attention, but again, there's sort of a balancing feature here between the practical and the more ephemeral. So I hope that's helpful. And now we will do the Mayhemmer. Yeah, the vortex. Hope that works for you, Delia. Okay, May. I will want to take another moment here before I lay these cards down to thank Net21 Adventures for having me on their Twitch, for the folks who are showing up to see me on my own pages on the book face. I'm not great at the Instagrams at this point, but I'm using my Patreon more and more to connect with people And we are all standing here on the precipice of the next part of our lives as performers 11 months in. Still not quite sure what's going to happen. So we're figuring out what Awesome Town needs to do next. I want to thank Paula Garbanzo for being my operator over there so I can be with you without worrying about everything it takes to make the StreamYard stream.
Just using my college degree.
That's right. He's using his college degree. Finally. It took a pandemic for all that technical theater training to come in handy. Okay. So now for May. Sometime we'll do one of these shows like a chatty show that is all like no shit there I was tarot card stories reading for people at events.
All the times you got the tower card.
Right. Like, yeah, there's so many stories. All right, May, what do you got for me? All your heat's in here. There we go. Got some heat in the cards, May. You have to bottle it up and send it off to your family freezing their little tushies in Louisiana. Okay. Speaking of heat, the Sage of Wands, he brings it. The Moon and the Magician. All right, so if you work for Nat 21, you're going to be very busy, is what all these cards are saying. Okay, so again, major arcana. In days of yore, these cards were sometimes known as the major trumps, but we don't use that word anymore. Although it is just short from triomphe. They were the major triumphs, as it were. So these cards are them cards. These cards come from that long arc of that is the part of the big musical score of your life as compared to the day to day. This guy's a little more day to day. So we'll start with him. May, you got wands. Wands, it's all about what you're doing, what you're going to be. Wands are getting out there. You with all your vibrancy and your vitality, this is the part where everything's gotten sort of shoveled into one great big productive push. You can see the sage is like the king. He is mobile. He's on the move. He's out there doing it, but he's in a leadership capacity. He is holding that torch high and leading other people towards good ideas, towards productivity. It's a great card. It does come with a lot of responsibility. I'm going to tease you and say this is about you learning to be a dungeon master, but really, I mean, it's mostly about stepping into being comfortable with leadership because you are capable and people see you are capable, and it's all about people wanting and needing that big picture and that sort of leadership from somebody. So there's lots of ways to lead. Sometimes you're the one carrying the torch. So we've got this guy here very much saying, I know what to do. Just do what I say. And then this part over here is the great universal reckoning for you. So the magician card may be familiar. In fact, the magician card comes up for us when we are being called on to. There's an aspect of mastery. So I'm seeing that as a recurring theme for you here. There's an aspect of mastery. There's an aspect of, you can see that he is comfortable. He's got a comfortable relationship with all of his different props. He's got a sword. He's got a pentacle. He's got a cup. He's able to move sort of in between the worlds. So this may be a bit about you trying to balance out. Like if you're comfortable speaking, but you're not comfortable managing money, if you're comfortable making decisions, but you're not very good at taking care of yourself, he may be suggesting that it is time for you to treat yourself more holistically and try to try to bring a certain level of professionalism, shall we say, to each one of those aspects of your life, because the magician is frankly pretty good at all of those things, good enough for stage. And in this particular rendering, the magician card, my magician cards are always sort of couched in spiritual terms. Like, it's very much the imagery of the African diaspora. So there's something here about roots as well. Then you got the moon card, and the moon card. Witchy people like the moon card often because it speaks to intuition and depth and paying attention to what's going on, sort of in your deep landscape. It does also speak to. People used to have the fear of the moon card because of thinking of it as, the terrors of being outside in the dark. We're not afraid of that. But there is the notion that you may not be able to see clearly where you're going. It's all about using your peripheral vision in order to maneuver outside in the moonlight, rather than counting on your daylight vision to do it for you. So we can use that metaphorically to say it's less about functioning from logic and more about listening to your intuition and your proprioception in order to be able to maneuver. So I would look at this and say there's a real practical component here of saying let's step it up in terms of your being able to realize your many projects and your ambition. So he says yes. This one says try to find some balance, which I know is that's tough for all of us. Is a balanced approach. A professional approach, as it were, to self-management. And then the moon card says, like, lean into your intuition, know that there are some unseen, there's some speed wobbles that may be coming at you. But I look at these together as a really nice bouquet of cards that suggests that you have a little bit of challenge ahead of you, some stuff to grow into, and you totally can. So that's how I would look at those cards. So if anybody has any questions for me before we go, feel free to pop it up there in the chat. I'm happy to spend a few more minutes with everybody. Again, my name is Madam Onça, and I am the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot. And you can find me outside the context of this moment together. You can find me all over the internets and all my various places. They're all listed up here so that I can follow up with you if you've got questions about any of these things. May says, thank you. This means a lot. And I have some things on the back burner. You are a hardworking person who always has a lot going on. I'm not surprised at all to know that. So, yeah. I think that's it. What else can I tell you, everybody? Again, I'm Madam Onça. I'm going to be doing this every week, presumably at the same time. And I am also going to be doing sort of a big reading for everybody at the beginning of each month. Just trying to work out the logistics for that because, of course, the first of the month is all over the schedule. So trying to figure that out. I've got that coming up. Again, I'll be doing videos specifically just for my Patreon people, trying to encourage people to learn more about tarot in this time of uncertainty. And what does this question say? Is the correlation between the Magician and the Two of Pentacles? Yes, there sure is. You may notice some, thank you. You may notice some consistency in the artistic treatment. I wonder if I can. There's a rule with cards. Whichever card you're looking for is always 78 cards from where you started. I would say that they both have this quality of juggling, which is very much, I mean, for us, it means something different because, of course, we're circus and sideshow type people. So juggling has a whole other set of connotations. But in the Victorian imagery and mythology, a lot of this stuff is actually very sort of secretly Shakespearean. Like this deck specifically has a lot of Shakespearean references. And this notion of juggling, they're always sort of talking about this mystic ability to maneuver between the worlds and to sort of gracefully manage adversity with a smile, I would say. Just wanted to see if I could find that magician card. That's another thing, as you're finding a deck that you like, whether it's, my deck or the baseball tarot or the James Bond tarot or the Hello Kitty tarot or the Frank Frazetta tarot, whatever you find out there that you like or whatever speaks to your mythical tendencies, One of the things that will come to you as you work with it over time is you'll really start to see where artists made those choices to make correlations between cards. Come on. Nope. Not going to find it. 78 cards later, still no dice. But yes, the answer is yes. However, the magician suggests mastery. Like, I'm totally good at this. And the Two of Pentacles is really about learning to do it. Like, it's a temporary condition. You are there managing to make the magic happen with very little resources while you get everything really going on and banging. And by the time you are a master of that, you will be the magician instead of somebody just stepping out. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, I think that's probably everything that we can do. It's been almost an hour and a half. My name is Madame Onça. It's been my absolute pleasure to be here with you. The pandemic is kind of kicking my butt, and I was a little bit exhausted even thinking about trying to come forward and do this with y'all today, but I had made a commitment, and now I feel great. So thank you so much for being here. Let's do it again next week, same time, same Nat channel, and yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks, y'all. Have-